Welcome to this special episode of the 8-Bit Guy. I'm doing it mostly for my Patreon supporters, and it's more or less just a little practice run to help me get used to some of the new equipment that I'm going to be using. So I just wanted to show you, these are the two cameras I've been using for the last couple of years. This is a Samsung NX2000, and this is a Samsung Galaxy camera. Now, both of these cameras were really designed primarily to be still cameras, but they did record video up to 1080p as a matter of fact. But I never really used the 1080p mode on them because, to be honest, the bitrate wasn't particularly all that much better than 720p, and the video quality just, there wasn't really that much noticeable difference. However, the biggest bottleneck was undoubtedly my old Mac Mini. So here's my old Mac Mini. And this is one that's on loan from my brother. He said if it works out, then I can buy it from him at a fair price, and if it doesn't work out, then I can return it. They look almost identical, except for the CD slot in my old one. The old system has a Core 2 Duo running at 2.4 GHz with 8 GB of RAM and a 320 GB hard drive, which is 5400 RPM. And here's the Geekbench 3 score. The replacement I'm using has an Intel i5 running at 2.5 GHz with 16 GB of RAM and a 1 TB hard drive at 7800 RPM. It doesn't seem all that much faster, but according to the Geekbench 3 score, it's actually over twice as powerful, so hopefully this will be enough to comfortably edit 1080p video. So the newer one is still several years old, and if it doesn't work out, I'm going to return it to him, and I'm going to get a Mac Mini server with the i7 quad-core CPU in it and see how that works. I bought some other upgrades as well, including a brand new Panasonic camera and a couple of new gigabit switches. So here's my old switches in my network closet, and they're all just 10100 megabit switches. You can see I like to label things. So you see where it says Cloud 01 and Cloud 02? These are where my two NAS drives attach to the network. And they can run at gigabit speeds, but have been hindered by the old switches. So it was already annoying copying these 720p videos over the network to my NAS drives on a regular basis. So I knew it was going to be even more annoying once the files got larger from doing 1080p or possibly even 4K. So I decided it was time to upgrade these switches too. So it was time to print out some new labels for the 16-port switch. These numbers you see on this, like C1, C2, etc., actually match up with the labeling on the faceplate of all of my Ethernet jacks around the house. But it's still nice to be able to look at a glance and see some of the more important things and where they connect, so I add additional labels. Fortunately, this switch should be a perfect fit replacement for switch C here. And by sheer dumb luck, everything I need to be running on gigabit is connected to switch C, so I'm just going to upgrade that one. I'm going to leave the other two switches running at 100 since there's nothing connected to those but printers and Apple TVs and a few things that just wouldn't benefit much from the higher speed. Fortunately, even the screw holes lined up perfectly, so this was easy to change. It also appears the power adapters were identical, so I could just leave the old one. Super easy upgrade. Unfortunately, I also needed to upgrade the switch in my studio room. I have a computer in there that does a lot of functions, and in order for it to benefit from the upgrade, the switch needs to be changed out. This one is also a direct replacement and fits the same screw holes. Unfortunately, the power supply is not the same on this switch, so I will have to cut these zip ties to replace it. I haven't messed with these cables any since I built my studio a few years ago. And here's some new zip ties. So it appears to be plugged in and working. I decided to label this one while I was at it, even though the old one was never labeled before. So that switch goes down, and actually one of the wires goes all the way over here to this computer, which most people never see. Now, I don't do any editing on this computer, but I do record sound, and I download video clips from my cameras and copy them up to the NAS drives on the other side of the house. So I definitely needed to boost the speed here. Along with the new computer, I also have to adjust to a newer operating system and a newer version of Final Cut Pro. And I'll have to learn how to use this new camera. So a lot of people are mystified as to why I run such old equipment. Now, part of it is undoubtedly because I'm tight with money, but I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I have a keen sense of awareness of what hardware I actually need to accomplish the goals I want to accomplish. So take those network switches, for example. I bought those years ago for like $30 a piece on eBay, used, and they have worked perfectly reliably for everything I've needed to do. Granted, once I started doing more video work in the last few years, they've gotten a little bit slow, but otherwise, for everything else I do, they've worked perfectly fine. Had I opted to buy the gigabit switches 5 years ago, they would have probably been about 4 or 5 times the price. So I couldn't justify it at the time. And, as far as my old Mac Mini goes, I've had this thing for 6 years, and it has been super reliable. I've never had one problem with it. It always works. And, so I just don't like upgrading to newer things and, whether it be software or computers on a work computer, because I use this computer for work. And so, I've just liked the fact that it always worked, even though it was getting a little bit slow for, the video editing task I was asking to do for it. But, it reminds me a lot of back when I used to work at a computer store about 15 years ago, and customers used to come in all the time and they'd be looking for a new computer. And so I'd ask them, well, what are you gonna do with this new computer? And invariably the answer was something like, well, I'm gonna check my email with it, and my kid's gonna write letters to grandma with it, And it never failed. They'd want to buy the most expensive computer in the entire store to check emails and write letters to grandma. Now, I wasn't going to stop them from buying the most expensive thing in the store, but if they asked my opinion, I would usually tell them, well, this low-end model over here will actually do those exact same tasks perfectly fine at a quarter of the price you're going to be spending on this high-end unit. So why waste the money on the high-end unit? And of course, everybody has their own opinion on that. For example, oh, well, maybe you just want to future-proof, For example, if I'd bought a more powerful system back in 2010 than this, maybe I wouldn't need one today. That's one way of looking at it, but since I never know what my future needs are going to be, I don't know, I just tend to buy the cheapest thing I can that does what I need, and that's just my philosophy, and I guess that's just carried over still today. So anyway, I guess that about wraps it up for this. So anyway, if everything works out and I get to figure out how to edit this together properly, then hopefully I'll get work tomorrow on back to business as usual. So stick around for that. I'll see you next time.